But through reform and efficiencies, we can make a material difference. It is worth, if you have time, I mean this in the proper sense, to talk to some of the staff here, because they've talked me through this morning some of the innovations that they've gone through that are cutting time the whole time. They're getting through many, many appointments here, the way they're processing the cases. This has all come from them. We asked them how these innovations come about, and they said it's our thinking about how we can improve the process. They're constantly doing that. So I don't sort of accept the basic argument that's put to me that you can only work at the pace we're working now, you'll never get more out of the staff and resources we've got. Actually, the staff here and in many, many other places across the country are very willing to look at ways of improving and changing the way they do things. And, of course, technology comes on top of that. Look, in relation to, I mean, I've said quite a lot about the various lies and misinformation that are put out there. My record is, it's open. I mean, there was nothing secret about being Director of Public Prosecutions. Every single case I prosecuted went to court and was looked at by a judge. I had an independent inspectorate, had access to every single file of every case any time he or she wanted, and I was overseen by the Attorney General, which for 3 of the 5 years was a Tory Attorney General. So that record, I mean, and so in a sense, rather than me trying to say any more about what I did when I was in office, you can access this material, you know where it is, you know what the facts are. But it is an important point that's more, the reason I've emphasised this today is because it's more, this isn't about whether I defend myself or my record, frankly. That record is there, you can see it, you can make your own mind up. It is something about the nature of our politics. Because once we lose the anchor that truth matters, in the robust debate we must have, then we're on a very slippery slope. And when politicians, and I mean politicians, who sat in government for many years, are casual about honesty, decency, truth, and the rule of law, calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right, then that affects politics, because a robust debate can only be based on the true facts. And that's why this is actually an important point about our politics, not about what anybody may or may not say on Twitter. That actually isn't the main issue. The main issue is, what are politicians here doing to stand up for the things that matter to our democracy and the way that we have robust debate? That's why I want to call this out, because I think it really matters. And it matters not just to me, not just to the Labour Party, but it ought to matter, and it used to matter, to all political parties. And it's a sign of where the Tory party have got to, that we're even having this debate. Thank you very much, Robert. Can I go to, I've got Chris Hope.
Chris Hope, GB News. And I must ask also about the grooming gang scandal. Critics will say it's not a far-right bandwagon issue, Prime Minister. The ICSA report looked at just 6 towns where grooming gangs were operating. Rochdale got 1 mention in 400 pages. We have found at GB News court report showing gangs operating in 50 towns across the country. Are you certain, as Prime Minister, it's not going on today? Why don't you order a national public inquiry to join the dots between 50 towns, not 6, barely mentioned in the J report? Are you afraid it might expose failings as your role as a DPP? And that's why Elon Musk says, were you complicit in the rape of Britain? You have not. To go after the far right on this does not go to the heart of the problem.
No. Look, Chris, look, on my record, I think you were actually covering crime when I was DPP. You were quizzing me at the time for the Telegraph as the crime correspondent, I think for the entire 5 years, if I'm right. And quite rightly, too. I'm not complaining the slightest. But you looked at my record for 5 years with me as I was doing the job, facing your questions. You've got access to all of the material. So, in a sense, you can look at it. I've set out what I did. I actually changed the system because I could see some of the things that were going wrong. I wasn't prepared. Unlike, some Tory politicians, I'm not tweeting about it or talking about it. I got on with changing it. In relation to the serious point you do make, because this is the victims here suffered terrible abuse, unthinkable, unspeakable, genuinely sickening abuse, and then they weren't listened to. That has to be taken seriously. We have to do everything we possibly can to make sure that never happens again. That's why I made the changes I did within criminal justice. Among the reasons I came into politics was because I felt that it couldn't all be done within the criminal justice sphere alone. It had to be done more broadly. On the question of this sort of call for an ever-increasing number of reviews. There have been a lot of reviews, including localised reviews, including into Oldham, for example. The Mayor of Manchester did his review, and the J report was intended to look at the different types of exploitation that went on. It was a comprehensive review. What Professor J said was really important there, and because I completely agree, which is this doesn't need more consultation. It doesn't need more research. It just needs action. There have been many, many reviews, this constant asking for a further review. No stone should be left unturned. But frankly, it's time for action. Get on with it. Why didn't the last government implement the J requirements? You've got to answer that question. For 10 years we've had reviews and reports. Did they act? No. They're now tweeting and talking about what they think should have been done. I've got some pretty basic questions to answer in relation to that, in my view. Thank you very much, Chris. Let me go back to Kate from Times Radio.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Kate McCann at Times Radio. You've just said there that on a separate issue we've had 10 years of reviews and commissions and looking at a question, and now is the time for action. In your speech just now, you said you don't believe in ducking reform, yet despite calling social care an urgent need in the general election campaign, you've just announced another review which won't report until 2028 fully. Will you bring that date forward now? And will you give those in the social care sector the protection from the national insurance increases while they wait for your report? Thank you.
I mean, firstly, thank you for raising this, because social care is such an important issue in its own right, and obviously it's also linked to the question of what happens in our hospitals, because it's got a huge impact, and we've got to get it right, which is why we put Louise Casey in charge of this. Who's renowned for getting to the bottom of things, coming out with really good, strong recommendations. And I want to build a consensus. I genuinely want a cross-party consensus, because if this is going to work and make a material difference, it's got to last through different parliaments. That will take time to get this right, but we're determined to do it. But we've also announced it will be in stages, because what I don't want to do is precisely what you're challenging me on, which is to say, well, we'll have to wait until the final outcome of Louise's report, which is why it'll be in 2 stages, with the first stage next year, which is what can we do now to improve the system as it is now. Now, some of that we've already started with fair pay agreements, etc., for staff. That really matters, by the way, because more staff leave social care to come to the NHS than to go anywhere else. And the reason they do that is because of the poor paying conditions and because there's no progression. And then they want to come to the NHS so they can progress their career. So some of it we've started. There'll be the interim or the first stage of the report next year, which means we can get on with some of the change that we need, because you're right, it's urgent. But it is right that we do it properly and take time and build the consensus that we need. Thank you very much.